Now, the history of macroeconomics, so the history of macro, is nowhere near a straight line. So it's not a straight, straight line. Okay, it's not like we've moved seamlessly from one model to the next and we've made like expansions or new understandings of things in light of new information. You know, old models are still around and for good reason. New models are coming in and for good reason. Okay, frankly, the arguments over theory are a lot like arguments over politics at Thanksgiving dinners, at least in the US. So, in the case of the Thanksgiving dinner, it's usually best to avoid these discussions just to keep everything civil. But in macroeconomics, these policy debates are huge. Right? It's actually kind of like the job of macroeconomists to argue with one another. So if you do bring these conversations up at the dinner table, it's very likely that you won't be invited back to the dinner table. But in economics, if you don't bring these arguments up, you don't get invited to the table to begin with. Now, this is actually a sign of strength of the discipline, not weakness. It's basically a contestation of ideas, okay? And the contestation is the way in which the science actually advances. Okay, now it's important to note that pretty much every macroeconomist is going to share the same overarching goals. Right? And those three goals are high employment, right? So we want people to be able to find jobs. We want stable prices. Okay, so we want the price level to remain relatively stable. We don't want to have hyperinflation, for example, like what we saw in Zimbabwe somewhat recently. And then three, we also want to have rapid economic growth. Okay, so economic growth is sort of like the tide that raises all ships. Okay, so if you have more economic growth, that means people are becoming wealthier and people have better access to the things that they actually need, right? And so rapid economic growth is often one of the three overarching goals. I should point out that lately, this third goal has come under fire. There's a new movement called degrowth. Okay, and time permitting later on this semester, we'll get into some of that stuff. It's kind of cool. It's really exciting. It's very interesting, and it's very different from a lot of more traditional macroeconomics. But I want to start with the traditional stuff first, and then we'll kind of build up to, rather, some of the newer stuff and some of the critiques.